Hello and welcome to Algebra 2 Midterm Review. The topic we are going to be reviewing is writing the equation. As we know, an exponential equation is written in the form of y equals a times b to the power of x, where a represents the initial value, or the y-intercept, and b represents rate of change. Now note, b can never be a negative value. And if b is greater than 1, that represents growth. And if b is greater than 0, but less than 1, that represents decay. Let's go to our first example. Determine the values of a and b for the exponential function given the following table. Write the exponential function. For our first example, we're going to start off with our equation, y equals a times b to the power of x. Our a value is the initial value, or the y-intercept. Y-intercept is just another fancy term for when x equals 0, and as we can see from the table, when x equals 0, y, or in this case, f of x, equals 2. So we now know that a equals 2. B is rate of change, which can either be growth or decay. By looking at the table, we can tell it's growth, seeing all values and all of the y values are greater than 1. To get to each value, you are multiplying by 3. 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 3 is 18, and 18 times 3 is 54. So we already know our b value equals 3. But what if the numbers were larger and you didn't know what multiplied to them? Well, what you can always do is take the last term and divide it by the term before. In this case, you would take 54 divided by 18, which would give you 3. 18 divided by 6 also gives you 3, and the same with 6 divided by 2. You now have your a value, which is 2, and your b value, which is 3. You can plug these into the equation to get y equals 2 times 3 to the power of x as your answer. If you are not given the initial value, you can substitute 2 points into the general form of exponential functions to create a system of equations with the constants a and b. This may sound a bit confusing, but I can show you why it's not. A function of the form y equals a times b to the power of x passes through points 2, 20 and 5, 120. Now, just like example 1, we are going to be starting off with our equation y equals a times b to the power of x. But as you can see, there's no y-intercept in any of the values we've been given. So we're going to have to substitute in the 2 points into our equation. You're going to substitute in the y values and the x values for each point. So for 2, 20, you're going to substitute it in to get 20 equals a times b squared. The same with 5, 120, which will be 120 equals a times b to the 5th power. You're going to want to get your a values alone or your b values alone. But since b has an exponent, that's what we're going to want to get alone. To do this, we can divide the larger equation by the smaller equation. In this case, you're going to do 120, which equals a times b to the 5th power, divided by 20, which equals a times b squared. We know 100 divided by 20 is 6. A divided by a would cancel out, removing that from the equation, and b to the 5th power divided by b squared is b third, because when dividing exponents, you subtract them. 5 minus 2 is 3, which now leaves us with 6 equals b cubed. To undo an exponent, you can multiply it by its inverse. In this case, since we have 3, the inverse would be 1/3. You're going to multiply both sides by 1/3 to get rid of the exponent and to get your b value, which is 2. So you now have your b value, but you still don't have your a value. So what you're going to want to do is plug that into one of the equations. It doesn't matter which one you use, but I prefer to use the smaller equation. So we're going to use 20, which equals a times b squared. You plug in your 2 to now have 20, which equals a times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4. So you now have 20 equals 4 times a. 4a. Divide both sides by 4 to get your value of a, which is 5. Just like example 1, you're going to plug these back into your equation to now have our final answer, which is y equals 5 times 2 to the exponent x. These next two examples, you can either try them on your own or keep going with me. If you wish to try them on your own, pause the video and replay it once you have your answer. If you've chosen to stay with me, we're going to solve the problem now. You have the points 0, 10, and 2, 80. As we can see, there is an initial value, a y-intercept, so we have our value of a. When x equals 0 in this case, y equals 10, which is going to be equal to a. Now, we don't have a table or anything to get b, and we don't have enough information to get this table. So what we're going to do is we're going to substitute. We're going to substitute in our first point, 0, 10, as 10, which equals 10, seeing we already know the a value, times b to the exponent 0. You're also going to substitute in 2, 80 as 80, which equals 10 times b squared. Just like the last example, you're going to want to divide the larger equation by the smaller equation. 80 equals 10 times b squared, divided by 10 equals 10 times b to the exponent 0. 80 divided by 10 is 8. 10 divided by 10 would cancel out, and b squared divided by b to the exponent 0 is still b squared. 2 minus 0 is 2. You now have 8 equals b squared. To undo the b squared, you are going to multiply by a half, the inverse, or the opposite, of exponent 2. You're going to do that to both sides to now get your b value of 4. Since we already had the a, there's no need to plug it back into our equation. We already know that the final answer is going to be 10 times 4 to the exponent x. Example 4. If you want, you can pause the video to solve it now. If you haven't paused the video, we're going to go along to solving it. You have points 2, 192, and 5, 12,288. In this case, we do not have a y-intercept, so we're going to substitute into our equation y equals a times b to the exponent x. We substituted in point 2, 192, and we now have 192 equals a times b squared. Substitute in the other point to now have 12,000 times 288, which equals a times b to the fourth. Divide the larger equation by the smaller equation. 12,288 equals a times b to the fourth, divided by 192 equals a times b squared. 12,288 divided by 192 is 64. A divided by a cancels out, and b to the fourth divided by b squared is b squared. So we now have 64 equals b squared. You can multiply both sides by 1/2 to get our b value of 32. Plug that into whichever equation you prefer to use. I prefer to use the smaller one. Square it, or whatever the exponent might be, to get 192 equals 1,024 times a. Divide it out to get a alone, and in this case, you're going to have 0.1875 is our value of a. Plug those two values, the a value and the b value, back into your equation to get y equals 0.1875 times 32 to the exponent x. is a 3-part example. You can choose to pause the video and do it on your own as the questions appear, or you can stay with me and I'll explain it either way. A population of koi goldfish in a pond was measured over time. In the year 2002, the population was recorded as 380, and in 2006, it was 517. Given that y is the population of fish, and x is the number of years since 2000, do the following. A. You are going to represent the following information in this problem as 2 coordinate points. You can choose to pause the video now if you wish to do this by yourself. If you haven't paused the video, I'm going to explain it to you right now. We know that x is the number of years since 2000, and the values we've been given is the year 2000, where the fish population was recorded as 380, and year 2006, where it was recorded as 517. If we subtract 2000 from 2002, we are left with 2, also known as our x value, and 380 as our y value. We now have our first point, 2, 380. You can do the same with the second year. 2006 minus 2000 gives you 6 as your x value, and the y as 517, our second point. Part B. Determine a linear function in the form of y equals mx plus b that passes through these 2 points. You can pause the video now if you wish to solve it by yourself. If not, we're going to continue. So, how you get m for the equation y equals mx plus b, you are going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. In this case, your y2 value is the 517, and your y1 value is the 380. Your x2 value is the 6, and your x1 value is the 2. 517 minus 380 is 137. Divided by 6 minus 2, which is 4, will get you with 35.25. We now know that m equals 35.25. The equation to solve for y equals mx plus b is y minus y1, which equals m times x minus x1. We don't know the value of y, but we do know the value of y1, which is 380. So y minus 380 equals m, which we now know is 34.25, times x, which we do not know, minus 2. Your equation should look like this. You're then going to want to distribute the 34.24, our m value, to the x minus 2. You're now going to have y minus 380 equals 34.25 times x minus 68.5. You can add the 380 to the right side to the negative 68.5 to get y equals 34.25 times x plus 311.5, which is in y equals mx plus b form. This is your final answer. Moving on to part C. Determine an exponential function of the form y equals a times b to the power of x that passes through these 2 points. Round a to the nearest 10th and b to the nearest 100th. If you want to solve this by yourself, pause the video now. If not, we're going to continue. So, we can do substitution since we don't have our y-intercept. You're going to substitute in the 2, 380, which will be 380 equals a times b squared. Do the same for the 6, 517 to get 517 equals a times b to the 6th power. Divide the larger equation by the smaller equation. 517 equals a times b to the 6th power divided by 380 equals a times b squared. 517 divided by 380 gets you a pretty ugly number of 1.360526315789. And your a values cancel out yet again, and b to the 6th divided by b to the 2nd, 6 minus 2, is b to the 4th. Your equation should now look like this. To get rid of that exponent, you're going to want to do the inverse, 1/4. Multiply both sides by 1/4 to get rid of your exponent. Your b value should be 0.340131578947. Substitute this back into whichever equation you prefer. I prefer the smaller one. 380 equals a times b squared. You substitute that in to get 380 equals a times 0.340131578947 squared. Square that number to get 380 equals 0.115689490997 times a. Divide both sides, and you get your a value to be 3,284.65443771.3. With your final equation, after rounding to the tenths place and rounding to the hundredths place for b, tenths place for a, you should have 3,284.7 times 0.34 to the exponent x. Thank you for watching this Algebra 2 midterm review for writing the equation of the exponential. I hope this was helpful to you.